The knights were in full fan mode, shouting her name like she was a celebrity instead of a knight. Some were practically waving glowing sticks, yelling, "Leona Everhart, we love you." Like today was a festival instead of a military appointment. The media pushed in next. One reporter asked the obvious question, pointing out that Leona had entered and graduated as top of her class from the Imperial Knighthood Academy's department, and was now officially the first woman ever assigned to the Central Branch Division. What did she think about making history? Leona smiled brightly and thanked everyone for coming to support her. And she knew exactly why they were here. The Central Division didn't recruit just anyone. They only picked the absolute top of the academy. It was also famous for being painfully conservative. A female rookie getting in wasn't just rare. It had literally never happened before. This wasn't luck or favoritism. It was proof that Leona's skill was simply impossible to ignore. She promised she wouldn't bring shame to her position, but the crowd exploded again before she could even finish her speech. A group of bald mages started flexing their muscles and cheering a name that instantly ruined her mood. "It's Regan Clanford, the magical genius himself." Regan even shoved past Leona like he owned the place, telling her to move aside. That made her eye twitch in irritation. Of course, of all people, it had to be him. And worse, he was also assigned to the Central Branch, which meant 3 full years of seeing his face every single day. The knights immediately turned on Regan's bald fan club mages, yelling at them to get lost and warning them not to mess with Leona, because she'd flatten Regan with one punch. The bald mages fired back, claiming Regan could wipe out the entire area with a single wave of his hand if he wanted to. Before things could spiral completely out of control, a photographer stepped in and asked for a simple photo of the two of them shaking hands. Regan scowled and started to complain, until Leona jabbed him sharply in the side. She plastered on a bright smile and agreed, before he could finish protesting. In situations like this, it was better to get it over with and move on. The photographer began counting down. The moment their hands touched, both of them froze. Leona felt it immediately, a strange tingling sensation shooting through her hand. Then an unfamiliar voice echoed in their head. "Finally, after 3 years, I finally succeeded." Judging by how stiff Regan suddenly became, he felt and heard it too. Before they could even ask each other what just happened, someone informed them that the commander was waiting. Later, they were formally welcomed by Miles, the commander of the Central Division. Miles casually mentioned that he'd heard the two of them were always together back at the academy. Regan immediately said that was news to him, while Leona called it completely false. The commander laughed it off, reminisced briefly about his own academy days, and then dropped the real news. Despite it being their very first day, the two of them would be paired together on missions from now on. Miles explained that the assignment came directly from the temple itself. It was a long-term investigation, and the first time the Central Division would be working hand-in-hand with the temple. The mission carried serious weight. The reputation of the Special Forces was on the line. Leona felt her heart skip. The temple didn't randomly assign rookies, especially not on their first day. Then the commander added the incentive. If they completed the mission successfully, their mandatory service would be reduced from 3 years to just 1. 2 whole years gone. That alone could change her entire future. Leona immediately raised her hand in agreement, but Regan refused on the spot. He flat out said he wouldn't partner with Leona under any circumstances, and pointed out that new recruits were usually paired with seniors. The commander admitted that was true, but reminded him it was tradition, not an actual rule. Regan didn't care. He said he valued that tradition and intended to follow it. Leona snapped back, asking if he was serious. 2 years off their service wasn't something you casually threw away. Regan shot her a sharp look and fired back, asking if she was serious. After all their clashes at the academy, did she really want to work with him? He even muttered something about knighthood department graduates being painfully simple-minded. The commander sighed, clearly unimpressed by the bickering. Then he slid a token across his desk. He explained that the temple was eager to meet the two of them as soon as possible. Together, they were to take the token and report to the Holy See by the end of the day. The commander smiled and wished them luck, making it clear that their team-up was no longer optional. Soon enough, Leona and Regan found themselves stuffed into the same carriage, rolling toward the Holy See. Leona sat there, already irritated. Regan had insisted he couldn't read while riding a horse, which, in her opinion, was just another excuse. If they had traveled on horseback, They would have arrived ages ago. Plus, splitting up on their very first day as partners would have looked strange. Meanwhile, Regan was completely absorbed in a book, calm as ever. Leona squinted at the cover. Dimensional Dynamics. Then, out of nowhere, a notification appeared, stating that a connection to dimensional streaming had been activated. Leona opened her mouth to comment, but Regan shut her down without even looking up. He said he was concentrating and asked her to stay quiet. Suddenly, the carriage jolted violently, shaking hard enough to rattle their seats. In an instant, Regan was pinning Leona against her seat to stay steady. At the same time, he caught a faint, sweet, intoxicating scent lingering in the air. That didn't make sense. Leona noticed his strange pause and frowned, asking what he was doing. Regan quickly scrambled back to his seat and muttered a stiff apology. Blushing, he tried to focus, but that sweet scent still lingered in his senses. Leona, never one to hold back, told him he should have trained his legs more. Weakling was the word she chose to describe him. He immediately fired back, saying that being a mage didn't mean he skipped physical training. Out of nowhere, a notification screen flashed, displaying a comment that Operation Love Fragrance was so close to succeeding. Sensing nearby magical activity, Leona instantly reached for her sword, while Regan cast detection and dispel invisibility spells. Instead of an enemy, however, they were both stunned to find a tiny being floating before them. Leona guessed it was a new type of magical creature, and casually suggested splitting the discovery reward 50-50. Regan said she could take the money. He wanted the honor. The little being suddenly screamed at the top of her lungs, demanding to know why these two only ever got along at moments like this. A few moments later, after plenty of dramatic crying, she introduced herself as the Great Spirit, Sylphian. Both Leona and Regan stared at her blankly, silently agreeing that the so-called Great Spirit looked incredibly dopey. She explained that 500 years ago, during the war with the demon world, she had used all her power to seal the Demon King. Her true body was currently asleep to recover, and this form was merely a spiritual projection. Regan processed the information quickly and summed it up in simpler terms. She was basically Sylphian's avatar. She waved it off and told them to just call her an angel. Most of her power and memories were gone anyway, so the title worked fine. She added that she was only following the mission her true body had left behind. When asked what that mission was, the angel hesitated before admitting it was to protect the hero who would one day save the world. Leona's eyes sparkled. She immediately assumed the mission had something to do with her and declared that she'd wanted to be a hero ever since she was a child. The angel nervously corrected her. It wasn't Leona. Leona panicked and instantly pointed at Regan, begging the angel not to say it was him. To her, Regan was exactly the type who would destroy the world out of spite if things annoyed him too much. Regan calmly corrected her, saying he wouldn't destroy the world just because he disliked something. The angel fidgeted and admitted that it wasn't him either. In truth, the hero was neither of them. It would be their future child. The carriage fell into complete silence. The angel explained that the child born from Leona and Regan would be the one to save the world. Tearfully, she admitted that she'd been trying to push them together for 3 whole years, and had failed spectacularly. Everything suddenly made sense to Leona. All those coincidences at the academy weren't accidents at all. Tripping during the entrance ceremony, getting caught in Regan's experiment and setting her hair on fire, fighting him during the cultural festival, none of it had been random. Regan immediately protested, and reminded her of the part she conveniently skipped, the time she dumped water on him, forcing him to give his matriculation oath soaking wet, or the misunderstanding where she attacked him even though he'd done nothing wrong, leaving him with a bruised face for 2 full weeks, all thanks to Leona. The two quickly fell into their usual back-and-forth bickering. The angel completely broke down, apologizing non-stop and calling herself useless and incompetent, dragging even her true form into the self-hate spiral. When Leona asked what exactly the angel wanted them to do, Little Angel answered nervously that Leona had to give birth to the child who would save the world. Leona's mind went blank. Of all people, it had to be Regan. The thought alone was a nightmare. Beside, she was a knight sworn to protect the nation, and pregnancy would interfere with everything she'd worked for. But if saving the world required sacrifice, she was prepared to make it. Stiffly, she asked if they should just do it for the sake of the world, awkwardly holding up her finger as if proposing the deed. Regan snapped back that maybe the knighthood department had questionable standards, but he wasn't sleeping with someone out of obligation. Leona exploded, furious that he dismissed it so easily after she'd forced herself to say it out loud. She accused him of being the one who should feel embarrassed. That was when the angel screamed. She declared that a loveless physical relationship was absolutely not the solution. The child had to be born from true love to vanquish the coming evil, or the plan wouldn't work at all. Leona immediately shouted that there was no way she could ever fall in love with him. Regan, now frowning, asked what exactly this evil was that threatened to destroy the world. The angel explained that the Demon King would soon descend upon their world. She admitted her avatar body was designed to awaken once the Demon King's seal weakened, and the recent appearance of demonic beasts proved it was already happening. These creatures existed only to kill, spread chaos, and amplify negative emotions. Regan thought it through and suggested that if they eliminated the demonic beasts, they could prevent the Demon King from descending altogether. Leona agreed instantly without hesitation. Regan added that he didn't believe he was capable of loving anyone, but even if he somehow were, he would never wish for his child to suffer for the sake of saving the world. Which was why Leona proposed handling it themselves and wiping out every demonic beast. The angel admitted it wasn't impossible, but facing the Demon King directly would be extremely difficult. She still believed it would be far easier if they simply fell in love. Regan calmly rejected that idea. If that was the angel's wish, then he would continue acting exactly as he always had. To him, if 3 years of forced romance planning hadn't worked, then even 300 years wouldn't change anything. He would never fall in love with Leona. Regan proposed finding their own way to save the world, keeping the romance route as a backup plan in case everything else failed. Leona agreed, and the two sealed the decision without hesitation. And just like that, an alliance was formed. One that was absolutely not what the angel had wanted. Angel disappeared, but not before warning the two that she had been holding back on her shipping goals, because they were minors. This time, however, she was going all out and making full use of something called dimensional streaming. Of course, neither of them had any idea what that even meant, so they simply continued their journey to the temple. A priest guided them inside and asked them to wait, explaining that High Priest Nathaniel was still offering his prayers. Regan hadn't expected to immediately run into someone as big fish as Nathaniel. Leona looked confused and asked if Regan even knew who that was. Regan reminded her, though with obvious judgment, that this was basic knowledge from chapel lectures back at the academy. Leona shrugged it off instantly. No one actually listened to those lectures, and she said it like it was common sense. Anyway, Nathaniel was a high priest favored to become the next pope. He'd made history just last year by becoming the youngest high priest ever, and the entire continent had been obsessed with him ever since. Leona's eyes widened as realization hit her. This must be that guy, the one known as Sylphian's Gift, the rumored dreamboat whose face alone was said to bring peace to the continent. Regan dryly pointed out that she didn't know his name, yet somehow knew his face by reputation. Leona, completely unashamed, replied that rumors traveled fast. She admitted she was excited to finally see him in person, and even planned to ask for an autograph. Regan glanced at her and felt an unfamiliar irritation rise in his chest. The reason was painfully obvious. She was practically grinning like a fool, just because Nathaniel was handsome. That alone annoyed him more than he wanted to admit, especially since she'd shown zero reaction to him this entire time. Bro, that was jealousy. But nope, you weren't ready to acknowledge it. Nathaniel soon approached with a gentle smile, apologizing for the wait as he greeted them warmly. Leona introduced herself politely, and Nathaniel commented that he'd heard of her unwavering dedication, which had become an inspiration to women across the continent. He said he'd been looking forward to meeting her. The way Nathaniel smiled at Leona was something Regan had never wished to witness for far too long. Shoving Leona aside, he stepped forward to introduce himself as well. The high priest praised him, saying he admired how his magical research had improved lives across the continent despite his young age. Regan casually accepted the praise and was about to respond when Leona snapped at him, telling him not to act arrogant in front of the high priest. Regan fired back instantly, pointing out that she had no right to lecture him on dignity after throwing punched at him. He called her an ignorant brute. Things escalated fast. Leona bristled. Regan asked what else he was supposed to call someone who drooled over a man's face, or would she prefer Airhead instead? Nathaniel hurried to intervene before the situation completely derailed. That was when a notification screen suddenly appeared in front of both of them. Endgame Shipper said, "OMG, I actually like the High Priest better. Can I switch ships?" Only Regan and Leona could see it. Nathaniel thankfully remained completely clueless. There was no doubt about it. This had to be the angels' doing. Grabbing Regan's arm, Leona quickly apologized to Nathaniel and dragged him out of the room. Several more notification screens popped up immediately, filled with bizarre usernames like Mini Fandom, Captain Trashbag, Pure Love Only, and Cavity King, all reacting enthusiastically to Regan and Leona holding hands, or what they called a romance baby step. Once they were alone, Regan observed that it seemed like these unknown beings were actively discussing them. Another message popped up from Ruler of the Night, who was instantly blocked for inappropriate content. Then, High Performance Juicer praised the stunning visuals of the two Central Division rookies, calling it entertaining to watch. Leona finally lost her patience and shouted for the angel to show herself. Regan doubted yelling would work, but the angel appeared anyway, floating nervously in midair. The angel admitted she had started something called dimensional streaming. After failing repeatedly, she'd asked for help, and hadn't expected such a massive audience. When Regan demanded an explanation, the angel clarified that she'd opened a dimensional channel, allowing celestials, or gods from other dimensions, to observe them. She added that the old system was boring, so she tweaked it. That was why the gods could now send messages directly. Then she proudly announced that these gods were officially supporting her. Regan groaned. Somehow, the situation had gotten even worse. It wasn't just one chaotic angel anymore. Now they had an audience of unhinged gods following their every move. The angel defended herself, saying she knew where to draw the line. Besides, she'd burned through 3 years' worth of divine power to launch the stream, so it wouldn't last long. Leona, surprisingly, seemed happy. She pointed out that some of them said she was cute, and honestly, they didn't seem that bad. Regan wondered if he was the only sane person left. Leona reasoned that it wasn't like these observers could actually do anything to them. Eventually, they returned to Nathaniel and apologized again. Nathaniel waved it off, explaining that he'd received a sudden revelation while praying. He already knew about their mission involving demonic beasts, and offered his help. A being mentioned only in ancient texts was alarming, but ignoring it would be far worse. Leona politely declined, saying they would handle it themselves. Internally, she was just relieved this plan didn't involve having a child with Regan. Nathaniel praised her resolve, calling her noble for throwing herself into danger for world peace. She brushed it off modestly. Regan added that Nathaniel should contact them if anything related to demonic beasts surfaced. The High Priest suddenly recalled something that might help and left to retrieve it. Regan frowned as he sat there, something Leona noticed but wisely chose not to ask about. Then the screen appeared again. Pure Love only said things are really frosty between them. The rookies must be struggling. East Not West asked, "Since we're here to help, shouldn't we do something?" High Performance Juicer agreed and said, "Let's start with something light." The gods' chat descended into complete chaos. Eventually, they decided to vote. The result? Stick their hands together, 443 votes. Stick their XXX together, 3 votes. Whatever the XXX meant, probably best not to know. A glowing light suddenly appeared, followed by another message announcing that divine will had been bestowed upon the world. Leona muttered about how weird these celestials were, but Regan only told her to sit instead. That was when Leona felt it. Something was about to happen. Before she could react, a divine beast suddenly dropped from above, landing squarely on her face. In the next instant, both she and Regan were flat on the floor. Nathaniel rushed over in alarm, asking if they were all right. Leona immediately gave a thumbs up, brushing it off like nothing happened. Then she and Regan locked eyes, both blushing, only to realize they were holding hands. The High Priest bowed so deeply he looked genuinely mortified by what had just happened. Both Leona and Regan sighed in unison, already exhausted, and asked the obvious question. Someone needed to explain this situation, preferably in very simple terms. The High Priest quickly introduced the culprit. The small creature was a divine beast named Luvi. Any 2 people it touched would end up stuck together for an entire day. He explained that while he'd gone to storage to fetch something for them, Luvi had suddenly appeared and, well, done this. He insisted that all of Sylphian's divine beasts were normally well-behaved, so he had no idea it would cause such chaos. Which meant Leona and Regan were stuck like this for the whole day, all thanks to the shipper gods. Both of them slowly turned to glare at the angel. She immediately panicked and claimed her divine power was already completely used up, so she had to leave now. She said this while sweating bullets, and very obviously lying. Then she disappeared on the spot. In their minds, every curse known to humanity was hurled in her direction, while they were still squeezing each other's hands. Once they left the temple and boarded a carriage, Regan immediately asked Leona to give him some space. Leona glared, asking where exactly he expected her to go in such a tiny carriage. Out the window? As she glanced outside, Leona suddenly froze and announced that she was getting off. Regan muttered that she really didn't understand jokes at all, calling her an idiot. Leona fired back by calling him a moron, then pointed straight ahead and told him to look. Up ahead, a man wielding a blazing sword stood surrounded by knights. Regan narrowed his eyes and recognized the situation instantly. An ether criminal. Ether was a special type of energy, completely different from normal magic. Those capable of wielding it were strictly managed by the state, since that power came with an equally high level of danger. Still, in every country, there were always criminals who abused it. Leona snapped at Regan to stop analyzing and get his lazy butt moving. People were in danger. She was about to jump out when Regan pulled her back by the arm. She glared at him coldly and demanded to know if he seriously planned to stay there because of his stupid pride. Were those people's lives worth less than his ego? She declared that she'd go out even if she had to cut off her own arm, and ordered him to move. Regan responded with a sigh and told her to watch closely. With a snap of his fingers, he cast frozen suffocation. In an instant, the criminal's body froze solid, locking him in place until he couldn't move at all. Smirking, Regan remarked that this was what people called a ranged takedown, on a completely different level from idiotic knights who couldn't even attack without charging in. That comment only annoyed Leona more. She really wanted to punch him. Unfortunately for her, they were still stuck holding hands. Otherwise, she would have happily demonstrated how dangerous it was to provoke a knight at close range. Then Leona sensed something else. She shouted for them to get down and slammed Regan onto the floor just in time, narrowly avoiding a magic bullet. Leona immediately realized the truth. The man on fire earlier had been a decoy. The real threat was a sniper. She wanted to chase the sniper before they could escape, but remembered she was still holding Regan's hand. With no time to waste, she pinned him down again, pulled out her gun, and fired. One shot. The culprit collapsed instantly. Everyone nearby noticed the weapon, and the sniper was arrested on the spot. Leona, still on top of Regan, casually aura farming and asked, "Who says I can't perform ranged attacks?" When everything finally settled, Leona groaned and said that thanks to someone, her first day had turned into a complete disaster. He replied that he felt the same. Then, she casually asked if he wasn't hungry, only for him to quickly say that he wasn't. She argued that they had missed both lunch and dinner that day. Regan shut that down instantly. It was only one day. She could endure it. Looking at their filthy clothes, Leona pointed out that even changing like this would be difficult for both of them. Regan suggested that she cut one sleeve first, and that he could fix it later with restoration magic if she wanted to remove her shirt. He didn't want to stay in dirty clothes either. She muttered that there would be no holding back, and began unbuttoning her shirt, which immediately made Regan avert his gaze, his face heating up. Using one hand turned out to be harder than expected, and Leona made a few strange noises as she struggled. Regan stiffened instantly and told her not to make it weird. She was just changing clothes. She muttered that the underwear part was the worst. It wouldn't come off. That did it. Regan literally sprang up from his seat like he was being launched. His innocent ears had been corrupted in an instant. He demanded how she could say something like that in front of a guy. She asked why she wasn't even allowed to talk freely now. It wasn't like she had shown him anything, but he insisted that kind of talk was improper. Curious, Leona asked why he was acting like he was seeing her as a woman. After all, she only saw him as a dumb mage, not even as a man. The thought briefly crossed her mind. Was he a virgin? But she dismissed it just as quickly. With Regan's face, there was no way that could be true. Meanwhile, Regan was internally losing his composure. Being alone in a room with a woman who wasn't his nanny was a first for him, and she didn't seem to understand just how reckless she was. Even earlier, when she had casually sat on top of him, right on that hard part. Of course, he forced himself to stop thinking about it and pull himself together. He needed to focus on repaying his debt to that idiot for saving her from the demonic bullet. Looking at him, she asked if he was trying to start another fight and told him he'd better drop it. He awkwardly asked if he had said something to upset her, or if there was anything she wanted since she had helped him earlier. He said he'd repay her so they could call it even. She could even pick something expensive, like jewelry, since girls usually liked shiny things. She asked how the conversation had suddenly turned into money. Still, if she had to name something, she quickly requested an absurdly rare item, the newly released SSS rank product, Roar of the Otherworldly Black Dragon. When he looked confused, she told him to forget it if he didn't know. She'd just send the bill to the Clanford family. Regan agreed and told her to do whatever she wanted. Once they had both finished changing, they glanced at each other. Leona asked what he was wearing. Did he think he was some kind of actor in a theater troupe? Regan shot back that she looked like a beggar. She countered that even royalty wouldn't dress like him. Irritated, he asked if she always slept in filthy clothes. Leona corrected him. They were training clothes, because she had to do her nightly exercises. As for mages like him, Regan said he needed plenty of rest to properly calculate magic formulas. But that night, sleep wasn't even an option for Regan. There was no way he could get any rest like this, while Leona was swinging her sword with her free hand and training non-stop. She told him to endure it, because she still needed to sharpen her skills to save the world. Training didn't stop just because the day had gone completely off the rails. So he gave up arguing. Fine. If sleeping was impossible, he'd just read a book and wait it out. Except, that didn't work either. Without realizing it, he found himself looking at her. This was probably the first time he had ever watched her train. Leona was completely locked in, so focused that it felt like the rest of the world didn't exist, him included. Her footwork was solid and clean, each step controlled. Her stance never wavered, and every swing of her sword followed a precise line. When she focused, that red ether, so similar to her hair, gathered around her as if responding to her will. Regan caught himself thinking she looked beautiful. The thought hit him so hard that he smacked himself in the face with his book as a wake-up call. Leona stopped and teasingly asked why he was hitting himself. Regan stiffly blamed a mosquito. She looked unconvinced and asked if he was bored, suggesting they head back to his room. Just then, another voice cut in. He commented on his room and asked, very pointedly, whether his eyes were playing tricks on him or if the two of them were really holding hands. Regan immediately noticed that the gaze directed at him was anything but friendly. Leona lit up at once and happily greeted the newcomer as her senior. Nathan smiled widely and slung an arm around her neck like they were old pals, saying it felt unreal to be welcomed back by Leona after his mission. Regan watched the exchange, instantly suspicious. Who was this guy? Nathan noticed him right away and casually asked who the man holding Leona's hand was. He even said that maybe she had gotten a boyfriend without telling him. Leona elbowed Nathan in the chest, saying that wasn't funny at all, and introduced Regan as a fellow rookie and mage, while Nathan Starlight was her senior from the Department of Knighthood. Nathan's next question was why they were still holding hands. So, she explained that there had been an incident during a mission and that they were stuck like this for the day. Her senior then offered, completely straight-faced, to cut Regan's arm off for her, which earned him another whack. Leona laughed and said he'd gotten better at joking. Eventually they parted as Leona cheerfully waved Nathan goodbye. As they walked away, she told Regan not to mind him too much. Nathan was a bit goofy, but not a bad person. Regan couldn't help but wonder just how dense Leona was. Once they reached the training grounds, Leona said she'd keep practicing there and told Regan to just stand around. He agreed, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Nathan, who was clearly not acting friendly toward Leona just because she was his junior. In fact, Nathan had been glaring at him like a rival male guarding his territory. Even Regan had to admit Nathan was good-looking and capable, So why would someone like him be interested in a woman like Leona? A woman who was basically a gorilla. Maybe there was some hidden appeal he just wasn't seeing. Objectively speaking, Leona's looks weren't bad, though obviously not better than his. Red hair was rare in the Empire. She had a high forehead, straight eyebrows, ruby red eyes, a sharp nose, soft cheeks, and fair skin. Even the way her red hair clung to the nape of her pale neck, paired with her faint, sweet scent. He slapped his forehead. He had practically been drooling over the very woman he'd just called a gorilla. Desperate to deny it, he blamed his feelings on divine interference. Obviously, this had to be the angel's doing. Some kind of enchanted prank to mess with his head. Regan suddenly shouted, asking if the angel and the gods were pulling weird tricks again. Nothing happened, and the angel didn't appear. Which meant everything he'd just felt came from him. He was officially losing his mind. A few minutes later, Leona finally sheathed her sword and told him they were done for the night. It was time to head back. She tapped his back with her hand. Blushing, Regan quickly warned her not to touch him. He claimed he might be suffering from hypersensitive magic sensory syndrome and asked her not to make physical contact without permission. She stared at him in confusion and muttered about what was wrong with him now. Then she pointed out the obvious problem. She was drenched in sweat and asked if she could take a shower. Regan immediately asked if she was crazy. She said she'd just lean into the bathroom doorway and wash herself. He shut that down instantly, saying anyone's shower was off limits and telling her not to argue. Leona asked if he seriously expected her to go to bed soaked in sweat. His imagination immediately ran wild again at the word sweat, and he got a nosebleed on the spot. Finally, he told her to just cut off his arm. In the end, Leona managed to clean herself using a magical cleaning tool. And that same night, Regan silently vowed to invent a spell that would allow people to shower without taking off their clothes at all. Inside his room, the two of them sat there feeling refreshed. When Leona asked if he wasn't planning to sleep at all, Regan firmly said he wouldn't die from missing one night of sleep. After reminding him of his own words about how mages were supposed to need proper rest, she casually mentioned that his eyes were a really deep blue. That comment caught him off guard for a moment. Eventually, he asked if she was only noticing now. Confused, Leona said it wasn't like she'd ever looked closely at his eyes before. She'd always assumed they were green, or maybe light blue. Regan teased her in return, saying her eyes looked a bit strange too, and that she might want to see an eye doctor someday. And then his thoughts betrayed him. He realized he did remember her blood-red eye color. It was unusual, one of those things that stuck in his mind whether he wanted it to or not. Then he heard a soft sound. At first, he thought he'd imagined it. But no, Leona had fallen asleep while sitting right beside him. Regan stared at her, irritated. It was the middle of the night. She was alone in a room with him. Someone who could use powerful magic and was considered devastatingly handsome. And she was sleeping like nothing in the world could go wrong. But the real issue hit him next. Would he really be fine staying awake the entire night? The next day gave him no time to overthink it. The two of them were now standing in front of their commander, who witnessed their unbreakable hand-holding firsthand. In the end, Miles decided to call Leona back once the effect wore off. Leona asked if the reason for summoning her was something Regan wasn't supposed to hear. The commander explained it wasn't exactly a secret, but it could be a personal matter for her. A new recruit was joining the Central Division, someone she had known since childhood, freshly graduated as the top student from the Spirit Academy. Leona frowned and immediately cut him off, saying she didn't have any friends like that. Regan, listening quietly, connected the dots in his head. Spirit summoning and necromancy usually came from noble bloodlines. And judging by the commander's careful tone, this wasn't some distant branch family. Whoever this person was, he came from a high-ranking household. That was why the commander wanted Leona's opinion first. He even offered to transfer her to another branch if she wanted. Leona thanked him, but said she didn't care whether the guy joined or not. If anything, she pointed out that transferring him instead of her would be more reasonable for fair treatment. Miles accepted her decision and moved on to the important news. The ether criminals captured yesterday had no memory of committing their crimes. Their memories cut off while they were on Garrel Island. On top of that, a mine worker had gone missing there just the night before. Because of the previous incident, the case had been handed directly to special forces instead of the local precinct. A portal would be prepared as soon as they were ready. Their first destination would be Mivatos City, the closest point to Garrel Island. As they were sent off, a female staff member awkwardly remarked that the two of them seemed to be getting along well. Both of them denied it at the exact same time, without missing a beat, of course. Once they reached Mivatos City, Leona's attention immediately drifted to the important things, like food. She was already looking forward to eating seafood. Regan reminded her they weren't there to eat. They were on a mission and should check the ferry schedule first. That resolve lasted about 5 seconds. The streets were packed with vendors, the smell of seafood hanging thick in the air. Leona was ready to pounce on everything she saw, when Regan tried to yank her back and reminded her about the mission again. Leona argued that her hunger had already hit its limit. One woman suggested that Regan should treat his girlfriend to lunch since their place offered a couple's set. Regan immediately denied that Leona was his girlfriend, then walked away while practically dragging her along. After confirming the ferry schedule, Leona protested that they still had an hour before the next ferry and suggested they at least eat something. Regan sighed and told her to wait 10 seconds. Exactly 10 seconds later, their hands separated. Leona stared at him, impressed. Regan had actually been counting down, and his timing was perfect. He said that level of precision was normal for him. On the spot, Leona thought this was exactly why mages like him were so insufferable. But since they were already there, she declared they might as well eat, and pointed out the couple's set the woman had offered earlier. Regan refused, but suggested they eat separately and meet back at the dock in an hour. Just because they'd been stuck together due to a Celestial's prank didn't mean anything had changed or that they were suddenly close. Annoyed, Leona told him he had zero tact, but he didn't care and just move on. If Regan thought she wouldn't be able to eat the couple's set, he was dead wrong. She ordered it anyway, and ate the entire thing by herself, leaving her completely stuffed and satisfied. As she walked, a little girl called out to Leona and handed her a small charm, saying it was exactly what she needed. It was a protection charm. The girl explained that her grandma had made the pouch, and she'd picked the flower petals inside herself. Her grandma was an amazing psychic, and had told her to make sure the charm went to a lady with red hair. She added that wearing it would protect Leona from dangerous men. When Leona asked if she even knew what that meant, the girl happily admitted she didn't. She was just repeating what her grandma had said. Half amused and half touched, Leona asked if she could buy all the charms instead. Even if it was just for peace of mind, it couldn't hurt. And anything that might protect her chastity from those weird gods sounded like a good deal. However, the girl refused, saying her grandma had told her to give Leona only one. Leona accepted that, then mentioned she knew someone else in a similar situation. She told the girl to wait there and turned around, already planning to drag Regan over so he could buy a charm too. Soon enough, Leona scanned the area, but Regan was nowhere to be found. Then she heard women screaming about a handsome man who looked like an actor. They'd never seen someone that charming in their town before, and now they were all eager to find out who he was. Of course, Leona already knew exactly who it was. She marched straight over, grabbed Regan, and told him they were leaving immediately because they didn't have time to linger. Regan, completely confused, asked if she'd found some kind of clue. She quickly said no, then admitted this was about protecting their chastity. But when they reached the spot where Leona had seen the little girl, there was no one there. Leona ignored his protests about being dragged there without checking first, and asked a nearby woman if she'd seen a child selling talismans in the area. The woman shook her head and said no one had been there all day, and that the stall had been empty ever since the old woman who used to own it passed away. So, had Leona just encountered a ghost earlier? Cut to the scene where both Leona and Regan were riding a ship. Leona looked around in awe at the beautiful scenery and wondered out loud if it was even possible to transport all of this with a ship that size. Regan sighed and commented that it was obvious she hadn't paid attention in geography class. Of course, she was the type who slept through lectures. Garrel Island only had around 50 residents, all of whom worked in the mining industry. These days they used magical devices, so the type of ship didn't really matter. And since the island produced a special kind of mineral, It was still profitable even if the annual yield was low. Leona still didn't understand why the Demon King would unleash monsters on a tiny mine like that. On top of that, the statue of Sylphian on the island had been stained. Regan advised her not to jump to conclusions and said they should figure things out after investigating. As Leona turned her gaze back to the vast sea, Regan found himself staring at her instead, momentarily caught by her beauty. Of course, he quickly looked away, hiding his blush. Suddenly, shouts erupted across the ship about stowaways who hadn't paid their fare. One man was being dragged along, begging not to be sent to Garrel Island. Another clung to Leona's leg, screaming that the island was basically hell and pleading not to be sent back, along with his companion. Both Regan and Leona tried to calm the man down and asked what had really happened on the island. With a trembling voice, the man explained that Garrel Island was now overrun with monsters and that most of the residents had already been slaughtered. He and his friend Jake had tried to escape, but Jake was attacked and badly injured. They barely managed to board the ship, and with Jake injured and himself completely exhausted, he fainted after boarding. When he woke up, they were already heading straight back to the island. Regan's expression hardened. If most of the residents were gone, handling this with just the two of them might be too much. He suggested turning back and calling for reinforcements. Leona immediately disagreed. There could still be survivors. Saving them came first. Reinforcements could deal with whatever remained afterward. Regan pushed back, asking what would happen if both of them got hurt. Could she take responsibility for that? But she snapped at him for being so negative. That was when they noticed the eyes on them. People were watching what looked like a full-blown lovers' quarrel. Turning back to the desperate man, Leona told him not to worry. They would do whatever they could. But suddenly she noticed the man lying on the floor was smiling, while quietly forming a spell in his hand. Regan reacted instantly, throwing up a shield in front of Leona. Now both men began acting unnaturally in sync, their expressions twisted as if possessed by something evil. Then the angel appeared, shouting that those creatures were the Demon King's minions. She explained that a demonic beast's behavior changed depending on the emotion it fed on. To defeat one, they had to identify that emotion, cut it off, and slowly starve the beast. Demonic beasts fed on human negative emotions, and the stronger the emotion, the stronger the beast became. The problem was that the angel was only an avatar who had awakened 3 years ago, so this was her first time dealing with demonic beasts. Regan advised Leona to stay calm and suppress her emotions while they handled the situation. The two monsters continued provoking them, saying that neither Leona nor Regan was anything special. Unfortunately, Leona's temper flared again, prompting the angel to scramble to calm her down. The demonic beasts proudly declared that they didn't deal in simple emotions like anger. They were the Demon King's elite minions, feeding on humanity's most debased feelings. They announced themselves as demonic beasts of shame. That somehow did stop the protagonists. Honest as ever, Leona even commented that a beast of wrath would have sounded more fitting than a beast of shame. That comment finally pissed the monsters off. In response, they summoned a massive wave and hurled it straight at Leona and Regan. After shouting for everyone to run away, Leona braced herself, expecting to be soaked. But nothing happened. She was completely dry. Other gods, like the scene-crafting artisan and the degenerate power warrior, were not pleased that her soaking scene had been skipped. One even commented that the monster clearly wasn't on their side. When Leona checked on Regan, he was completely drenched. Naturally, gods like scene-crafting artisan and spinny spin spin were very satisfied with this development. Leona burst out laughing and joked that Regan should have done more strength training. Regan, now the only soaked person, turned even redder. Unfortunately, the demonic beasts fed on his embarrassment and launched another wave attack. This time, Regan desperately tried to block it while complaining why he was the only one being targeted, while Leona remained untouched. She yelled at him to stop feeling embarrassed, since it was only making the monsters stronger. Eventually, Regan was overwhelmed and took a direct hit to the chest. At that time, even Leona started wondering why the attacks weren't affecting her at all, until she remembered the little girl's words about the charm protecting her from dangerous men. She looked down at the protection charm in her hand. The moment the demonic beasts sensed it, they hissed and recoiled, complaining about the scent of the flowers and demanding she stay away. That confirmed it. The charm was working. The beasts attacked again, but Leona confidently stepped forward, declaring it useless as long as she had the charm. Unfortunately, she forgot that Regan was standing right behind her. Poor guy took yet another hit and was sent floating into the air. Seeing that he didn't even have the strength to cast a levitation spell, Leona leapt up and caught him. For a brief moment, Regan's mind went blank until he saw his own blushing reflection in Leona's eye. He looked like a damsel in distress being rescued, and that realization made him furious. So when they landed, Regan coldly said to let go of him, looking like he was ready to kill someone. He unleashed every attack spell he had, intent on pouring all his humiliation and rage into the demonic beasts. But Leona stopped him, saying that his attacks alone wouldn't work. The plan was simple. With the charm protecting her, Leona would take the lead with her sword, while Regan provided support. She didn't hesitate. She charged in, shouting that this was actually satisfying, while exchanging blows at the monster. The angel, watching everything unfold, clapped excitedly and commented on how cool Leona looked. Suddenly, message screens from the gods began appearing again. Degenerate Power Warrior commented that all he was seeing was fighting. Pure Love only agreed and said she had come for romance, not this. Spinny Spin Spin suggested they do something before the demonic beasts were sealed. High Performance Juicer chimed in, proposing that since they were on an island, they should just destroy the ship. In the end, the romance-crazed gods voted unanimously, 455 votes, to strand them. Then the will of the gods descended. One of the demonic beast's eyes suddenly glowed, and in the blink of an eye, massive waves clashed as a violent explosion tore through the ship. The result was obvious. Both of them eventually found themselves lying on the island shore. Leona was the first to stir. She frowned, trying to figure out where she was, when an old man approached, relieved to see that they were finally awake. He explained that he had been helping move injured people who had washed ashore and introduced himself as the chief of Garrel Island. Apparently, the island's ship had been stolen recently, and for some reason, fragments of it had washed ashore along with several people. He added that they had managed to contact the main island, and that things were slowly stabilizing again. Leona and Regan exchanged looks, so the demonic beasts really had been taken care of. When the old man asked if they knew what had happened, Leona explained that ether criminals had boarded the ship and attacked them, carefully leaving out the part about demonic beasts. The chief believed her and assumed the criminals were the cause of all the chaos. Still, he was relieved that everyone had survived. Leona decided it was best to let him keep believing that. Then came the bad news. There was no ship available to take them back yet. One had been requested, but it wouldn't arrive until the next day. And since the inn was full of injured people, the two of them would have to share a room. Both of them froze internally. So this was the strand them together plan the gods cooked up. Leona immediately cursed the gods again. Scene crafting artisan proudly commented that it was a timeless trope in every dimension, while another god joked that it was a shame the ship had conveniently stopped running. Since there was no way out of it, Leona quickly assessed the situation. Regan was obviously exhausted, but so was she, and she wanted a soft bed just as badly. For a brief moment, she considered settling it with arm wrestling, then downgraded the idea to rock, paper, scissors while shooting Regan a challenging glare. Regan, meanwhile, could tell she was already plotting to claim the room. Still, after everything she'd done that day, he decided he could survive sleeping outside for one night. More importantly, he didn't want to reveal yet another embarrassing side of himself. That was when Leona suddenly asked if he could swim. Regan immediately sensed danger, and sure enough, she suggested they just swim back to the main island. If he didn't like it, he could stay behind alone. She even warned him that staying overnight together on a tiny island might lead to who knows what. Before he could respond, Leona dove straight into the water. Then, she waved at him cheerfully and said that if he couldn't swim, he could sleep there and leave tomorrow. Regan panicked and shouted for her to at least cast a temperature-regulating spell if she was serious, then hurriedly cast one himself. Degenerate Power Warrior was completely amazed. He'd never seen anyone choose a 2-hour swim just to escape a forced romance setup. Another god jokingly asked if they could wish for a scene where the two blushed after catching glimpses of each other through soaked clothes. But another god immediately shut that down, saying it was asking too much from those two. In the water, both of them fought for endurance, and to protect their own chastity once again, while the angel teared up and apologized to them. They eventually made it back, but by then, it was already night. Both of them complained non-stop, saying they felt like they might collapse any second. Leona still couldn't believe Regan had actually followed her, and when she finally looked at him properly, she realized something unexpected. He was more muscular than she'd thought. Regan caught her staring and immediately asked what she was looking at, adding that they should go to their separate rooms. Leona flustered instantly, denying everything, and insisting she was leaving anyway. She turned to go, only to notice Angel following her. Leona asked if Angel wasn't leaving too, and the angel replied that she was. Then Leona noticed what Angel was holding. Angel explained that when demonic beasts lose their power and get sealed, they revert to their original stone form. She had retrieved it earlier from the sea. Leona nodded but pointed out that Angel looked like she wanted to say something else. Angel bowed deeply and thanked both of them for defeating the demonic beast that day. Leona brushed it off cheerfully, saying it was nothing and reminding Angel that she'd promised they were going to save the world. That was exactly why Angel looked even more embarrassed. She admitted it was also the reason she was excited about the idea of amazing people like them having a child. Then she quickly turned away, muttering that she needed to go gather divine power, because it apparently took an absurd amount of it just to bring two people together. Leona stared at her, completely confused. When she looked down, she realized there was something in her hand, high-grade holy water. She laughed softly, realizing it must have come from Angel. Turns out the cute Angel really did feel bad for dragging Leona and Regan into that mess, and this was her awkward way of apologizing.